In this series, Herd Strategies President Denise Herd connects with industry leaders and community members to discuss the challenges they face within their fields. Join us bi-weekly to learn all about how they see us.
Hi, my name is Denise Herd, and welcome back to another episode of How They See Us. If this is your first time joining us, we're so glad you're here. And if you're a returning listener, thank you for your continued support. In honor of National Family Caregivers Month, we're having a meaningful conversation about what it means to care for someone living with Alzheimer's while holding everything else in your world together: your job, your relationships, and even your sense of self. Joining me today are two incredible guests. First, we have my lifelong friend, Kim Raby, Sales and Planning Manager at the Madam Walker Legacy Center, who cared for her mother for nearly a decade while balancing full-time work. Also joining us is Kevin Enders, Senior Director of Community Engagement at the Alzheimer's Association Greater Indiana Chapter. Kevin leads outreach and education efforts across the state, helping individuals, families, and communities navigate every stage of the Alzheimer's journey. Currently, the chapter is running an extraordinary educational campaign, Know Where Alzheimer's Hides, in an effort to reach Black and Hispanic audiences who are disproportionately impacted by the disease. Kim and Kevin, thank you so much for being here. And will you both please take a moment to introduce yourselves to our listeners? Kim, I'm looking at you, so I'll start with you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you for having me at this wonderful occasion. I am a caregiver for my mother. When she was alive, she recently passed just over a year ago in October. And she was living with Alzheimer's for roughly 13 years when we actually had her diagnosed. And now caregiving for my father, who is about to start his official journey, having his MRI on Friday. But he has been exhibiting mild signs of dementia now for the last probably couple of months. And so now I'm picking up that journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today and your willingness to be a part of a very transparent conversation about what it's like being a caregiver, dealing with families, with family members with Alzheimer's and dementia.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I serve with the Alzheimer's Association Greater Indiana Chapter, and if you're not familiar with the Alzheimer's Association, it's a worldwide voluntary health organization. It's dedicated to Alzheimer's care, support, and research. And hearing you, Kim, and your journey with your mom, and now stepping into your journey with your dad, it's that bittersweetness of walking through that so you can share and help others now, but still walking through that yourself. And at the Alzheimer's Association, one of our primary visions and goals is a world without Alzheimer's, but we know there's no cure yet. And it's essential to make sure that while individuals are walking in that journey, we want to make sure that they feel supported, cared for, but we also provide the resources, access to treatments, access to lifestyle changes that can capture those moments longer with the family members. And that's really what the work that we're trying to do here at the Greater Indiana Chapter is: how can we spread that education, that awareness, those resources, all at no cost, because we know it's essential. And to your point, Denise, earlier, the Know Where Alzheimer's Hides campaign is specifically focused on reaching underreached communities, specifically here in Indiana. That's the Black Hoosier and Hispanic Hoosier populations. Because we know that there's health equity access that's real, right? And there's a lot of data that goes behind that, but then you hear the stories and the reality of it, of individuals walking through. And that's where I step into this conversation. And Kim, thank you so much for supporting your mom through that journey and how we can help support you with your dad.
And Kevin, we thank you because you could work anywhere and you chose to work at the Alzheimer's Association. And I also thank the Alzheimer's Association for recognizing that we have a population that is underserved, underrepresented, and there's a lot of things, cultural things that go into that. And I appreciate you all taking the time to create an initiative that speaks to this critical audience and critical public that needs this information, because Alzheimer's doesn't discriminate. Anyone and everyone can be impacted. So thank you so much to you. So Kim, I'm going to start with you. I've got a question for you. So I've known you forever. So I know your mom, and she's taught us all dance and gym and all that kind of good stuff growing up, in Girl Scouts and everything else. And so can you tell me, because your mom was very vibrant and active and strong and just really, really mobile. And so can you tell us a little bit about your mom and what it was like during those early days when she was diagnosed?
And thank you, Denise. Yes, it was a shock to all of us because, as you said, she was very vibrant. And she was also in academia. So she was a teacher for many years before she moved into administration at Wayne Township. And she worked there until probably her early 70s. And they still honor her with the M.G. Raby Excellent Award. And she attended that even up until the time, maybe 3 years, when she wasn't able to go out of the home and all of that. And she used to sing when she would present the awards because she loved to sing. But I will say it was a very trying time when she was initially diagnosed, because the word Alzheimer's meant something very different to her. Because in the South, that's where my mom's from, Perry, Georgia. My dad is also a Southern guy from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That meant something different. It meant that you really weren't a part of society, kind of locked away. You were in an insane asylum, or for lack of a better term. And you were treated differently, just sort of really locked away. And there is a scene in the movie Queen where she was in a home because she was having, mental distress. And whenever I would see that movie, that made me think of that had to be hard. And it was hard because Mom never really wanted to hear the word. We couldn't say the word around her for years or talk about it outside of the home. We protected my mom and dad for their need for privacy because they didn't want people to think of them as less than. Very active in the community, so of course they didn't want the community to think that now they cannot manage an outward face being a part of the community. And if you would have seen her in her first probably 8 years, you would not have known that she had Alzheimer's or dementia, because she, outside of that horrible disease, she was very healthy, very healthy. She was not even on any medications until probably the last maybe 4 or 5 years of her life, when it was probably blood pressure, because things did really bother her, little things. We started noticing that she would, of course, repeat herself. Some of the obvious signs that you hear about: repetition. She would forget things, hide things from herself, agitated by the littlest thing. So if you had a cell phone and she didn't have a cell phone, then it became a problem with why couldn't I have one. It was just the little things. Driving, things that you dread as a child, having to have the conversation about, let me take my keys away from my parent. But you start noticing these things, and I didn't want to face it. I have an older sister who also was helping to be caregiving. My dad would always tell you, "Well, I'm the caregiver. I'm fine. I'm the one to make the decisions." Out of respect for him, we would let him have that too. But it was very frustrating. I would get calls probably 2 or 3 times a night. And I would leave my home in McCordsville to drive all the way to the near north side because my mom is sundowning really badly. But we really wouldn't understand what sundowning was, and she would throw things. And she wasn't a cursor at all. We never cursed growing up till I met her.
I'm sorry, you all. I'm so sorry.
So she started cursing. She never really drank. Then all of a sudden she had to have a beer. on a Saturday watching a game. So there were things that started happening where I had to be the peacemaker. So that went on for 2 years. And so I never knew what to expect. So it was very, very trying.
Yeah, yeah, and and then we'll delve into this a little bit more. But there was a lot that went on as your mother began to, decline, if you will. And so we'll come back to that in momentarily. But I want to turn to you, Kevin, because I want to ask a question about, when a family does receive, that news, that Alzheimer's diagnosis, what are some of the first things that families or even caregivers need to think about, even though they're not ready to? Because as you heard from Kim's story, they weren't ready. And so they decided not to be ready. So they kind of said, we'll just ignore that little pink elephant over there in the corner, but the pink elephant was still there. So what should families really do when that diagnosis comes their way?
Kim, you're very validated in the sense that it's overwhelming. There's a lot to think about. The words, the stigma, everything that comes along with that comes with that diagnosis. And to your point, and we'll probably mention a little later, but there's cultural aspects to this too.
Yes, very much
right?
so. Very much so.
Based on where you're at in the United States, from ethnicity to race, from disabilities, abilities, like there's different components to that, right? And that's significant. When a loved one is diagnosed, it is very overwhelming, not just for the individual, but for the family. It's not an individual disease, it's a family disease, and that's one of the first things that should be taken into consideration of it's not just mom, not just dad, right? It's not just the daughter who's caregiving, or I like how you encouraged your dad to be that voice, but in reality, the high percentage of caregivers in this field, not just for Alzheimer's and dementia, but caregivers in general, are predominantly the females of the family. So that brings this point to start building a care team. And what does that mean? It's your friends, it's your family. It's start educating everyone about the warning signs of Alzheimer's. It's the brain health aspects of it. Educating yourself not just on the treatments or the drugs and medicines available, but what are those lifestyle changes that we can put in place to slow that cognitive decline? Because those are significant. And it's silly to say that the things we grew up hearing, to get enough sleep, eat right, physical activity, social connection, now there's data and science behind that, to saying like when that's put into place in an effective way, and it's hard to change those habits, but slowly changes those habits over time, for those individuals who are diagnosed, can have a significant 1 to 2 year improvement in their brain health. So it's significant. So it's almost educating yourself and that care team, so your family and friends, on these are the signs, this is the progression of the disease through the different stages, and also understanding like what are the small things we can do now to save these moments, to capture these moments, whether video recording, write them down, and say like how can we capture these stories, because right now the first survivor is still out there, and there's no cure to this disease. But there are treatments, there are opportunities, there are lifestyle changes that can slow that progression or even pause it for a brief time.
I love the what you talked about. What can we do, like capturing those stories? What can we do to get all we can out of that person while they're with us? Because I remember my mother was the caregiver for my grandfather, and one of the things that she did, and it's funny because my mom passed also last summer, and when I was cleaning out the house, I found this box, and inside the box, and I just had to start laughing, were these cassettes and a tape recorder. And I remember my mom sitting with my dad and just asking him stories, and my grandfather, and he would tell all these stories. And so now we have this box of cassettes, and my grandfather is telling stories about when he lived in Guam and all the businesses he owned, and when my mom was born, and because my grandfather was an interesting character. So conversation for another day. But you're right. But capturing those familial stories, and because that keeps them connected, and so that's really important. So thank you for adding that. It brought back a memory. So Kim, while you were caring for your mom, you were also working a full-time job.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Maybe anywhere from 40 to 60 hours.
Yes.
In
so,
events.
Yes. And your job is not like sit at a desk. Your job is active. You're moving about, and the hours are crazy. And so how did you balance everything?
I really didn't, to be honest. I think the phrase gerbil wheel You hear that and you're like, oh, I was on a jumper wheel. And I'm like, you were not. So I just survived. I didn't really thrive through it because when you have the whole family aspect, you don't know what's coming next. I know that I'm going to be working and I have an event and I might be busy for the weekend, but I also know that I'm a gardener. I love to cook, but I also know that I'm not going to be able to do any of that because I have to make sure that, we have groceries in the house. Either I'm bringing it or having it delivered, still making Sunday dinners because my parents like cooked meals. And so making sure that I have enough for Saturday and Sunday, of course. They always like to eat together. So for years, 10 years, I'd say I'd probably made Christmas dinner and Thanksgiving dinner for the last 20 years. And my mom would be in the kitchen and would help, but it was kind of me. That's my thing. And I really didn't think anything about it because I like to cook. But when you need rest, you just sneak it, which is not healthy. And my personal doctor, we would have this conversation about me being so stressed out, and I always say that's the reason why I'm so fluffy today, because I was stressed out. That's my excuse. But she would say, how much sleep are you getting? About 4 hours. And so that was my norm, which of course is not good. And I would say, and I multitask. And she said, stop saying that. That's actually not a good thing for women, especially because that depletes your brain power. And you obviously need that for what's going on. So I was really stressed out, but I just kind of learned to live with it. And it's a different kind of stress now since we're preparing the house, my parents' home, for sale. So that's a whole beast.
Yeah, that conversation for another episode. But thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you for being honest, because when people say, well, how did you balance it all? And people always try and come up with this really beautiful story about how they were able to balance everything, but it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way even if you don't have the pressures of caring for someone. We never have balance. So thank you for being honest there. This is a question for you both, and so I'd love to know both of your thoughts on some of the emotional and or mental burdens that caregivers carry that people don't know about.
So when caregivers are caregiving, you have to think they might have a family of young kids, right? They're probably working. They're clearly caring for their loved ones, but they also might be carrying the weight for the rest of the family with siblings who might not be able to or might not want to contribute to the health, right? Or to the help. And there is an invisible weight. And that invisible weight carries a lot of things, sneaking in sleep, right? Of knowing that you need enough sleep, but I'm going to take a nap over here and let people think I'm just going to keep going because you feel that as the caregiver. And that also comes with grief, guilt, isolation of am I doing enough, right? Is there enough out there? I can't do this anymore. It's that burnout. It's everything that comes along with that, because I think the work-life balance is,
it's a joke.
It's a joke because
really
there's
is.
no balance in it, because life happens and
Right.
you don't know when life happens,
Right.
or you don't know how long life's going to happen in certain situations, right?
Right.
Especially in Alzheimer's and dementia, that could be a journey of, I've heard it as low as 38 days for one individual from diagnosis to passing to decades. And it's significant, but you don't know the time you have. And you can't, it's a labor of love. So when it comes to mental burdens, it's not a walk alone that caregivers are having. So just here in Indiana, 219,000 individuals are caregivers to someone who has been diagnosed. Just to those who have been diagnosed, right? So you cut that number in half, it's about 121,000 here in the state, over 65 have been diagnosed. So take that number roughly of those who have been diagnosed, multiply that by 2, that's typically the caregivers. One to 2 individuals within the family. It's that care group that is really feeling the weight of this. Speaking of the work side of things, so out of those 219 caregivers here in the state, that equates to 325 million hours of unpaid care. So you have to step away from work sometimes and for unpaid. That's a value here in Indiana only of $6.9 billion.
Wow.
when you start to think about it in numbers.
My
Right?
goodness.
So how much money is happening or not being earned by these individuals when they could be working? And that's the other part of it. It's the sandwich generation caring for children and their parents. I heard the other day, I talked to someone the other day who also is caring for an adult child who has disabilities and a parent. So now they're caring for two adults from on different spectrums, right? So there's no one situation that fits this, but so much of the similarities exist. So 57% of employed caregivers had to adjust work schedules. 9% left the workforce entirely, so nearly 1 in 10 caregivers just had to stop working to provide care. And those sacrifices are rarely seen, but they're deeply felt. And I can share personal stories from one of my past jobs. I worked with an individual who was a caregiver, using all her sick time, all her PTO, anytime she could scrounge up. And unfortunately, that organization let her go. And it wasn't the fact that she wasn't doing the work, but it was the perception of, oh, you're spending too much time outside the office.
Taking care of a family member.
Right. And so that's where we want to step in too. The Alzheimer's Association, I think advocates all over should say the workforce needs to be better educated about the caregiving reality. And I'm not saying just for Alzheimer's and dementia, just caregivers in general, because the weight of that is so big. Because the expectation someone might have on themselves, the expectation the work has on them, the performance, all this comes into play. And then you have to go home and make meals. And then when do you find sleep and spend time with family and friends?
I appreciate you sharing those numbers, because sometimes when it comes to legislation, when it comes to policy, when it comes to how can we get change, how can we make change occur? We can talk about all the societal effects, we can talk about all the emotional effects, but sometimes when we break it down to dollars and cents, then people start paying attention. So that's a narrative that people understand. So when you gave that number, was it $6 billion in $6.9 billion in wages that have been lost? Basically lost because we don't have adequate resources for caregivers to care for family members. So I think that that's a number we need to start pushing out how, from an economic impact perspective, this is what this disease is causing and creating and its impact. So thank you for that data. Thank you. Kim, is there anything else you want to add to this particular conversation about the things that people don't see?
There was a statement that my mom's doctor made in the early years of diagnosis is, this disease will bring your family together
Or break it apart.
Yep. And you don't even think about it until it's happening. And then for me, just to reach out, because my brother lives in Dallas, and to say, listen, I need help. And then he said, well, what do you need help doing? So then I thought, what do you mean? So then once I started and I was open and honest, and he was like, I'll take over. I'll start ordering Groceries. You send me the list. Stay with me, though, because I'm busy. He's a director for a hospital. And so, but just being able to ask that, and then my close friends, Denise and some of my other girlfriends, my sorority, once I felt comfortable enough, and even still I didn't, but she knows me, and she would say, what are you doing? What do you need? I got you. I'll talk to some of our other friends, but it is staggering when you talk about the lost wages. I remember when my daughter was young, I saved my PTO because in case she needed it, in case she was sick, or I was traveling a lot. So I always banked my PTO. I find myself doing that now for my parents. Banking my PTO, not for vacation. I finally went to a vacation this past summer for my birthday in June. That was the first vacation I'd had in 7 years. Because when I take PTO, it's always for the family. And so you think about that piece. Fortunately, I have it, and I work for an organization that's very generous. But what if I didn't?
Right. I think also as when you have friends that are caregivers, I think we have a responsibility to pay attention to them as well, because you know your friends. And so like with Kim, I know when she starts ghosting all of us, something's going on. When you call her, you don't get a response, or you text, you don't get a response. So my thing with her is, I'm gonna call 911 on you if you don't respond. And so then usually I get a text back. But so it's also very important because it goes both ways. We have to check on those that are serving in that caregiver role, because a lot of times pride, stigma, they just want to keep it to themselves.
Yes, you're right.
All right. So we're going to move on because it might get emotional. So we're going to move on. So we shared that earlier, that the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Indiana has been leading an effort to reach underrepresented populations and who are disproportionately impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia. So Kevin, what resources do you all offer for people who are struggling to take the necessary steps towards treatment or even getting a diagnosis?
It's a challenge because we're up against a few things. The stigmas, right? Being diagnosed, but it's also understanding of where do I go to next? Understanding navigating the health system, and as I mentioned earlier, race and ethnicity and socioeconomic status, all that aside, it's like, how does a person, given the means, given the status, given these things, still navigate the health system? And you talk to health systems, and the doctors have trouble navigating their own systems, right? So that's a significant challenge. So where we're at is saying, how can we help provide that gap and fill that gap? So one resource, and this is really committed from the Alz Equity for Indiana, which comes from the Know Where Alzheimer's Hides campaign. Specifically, how do we educate more Black and Hispanic Americans on going to those communities versus seeking them out? And I will say, like, in my time with the association, we're really good at receiving those who come to us. We can do better, like so many other organizations, to go to the communities. And representation really truly does matter. The trust factor matters, and that means like navigating beyond. So we're, as an association, not a health system, right? But we are part of the public health system. We're public health educators, right? So how do we do that? And through that, we have a few resources. The number one resource that we have, it's accessible for free across the country. It's our 24/7 helpline, and it's always answered by a person who is a master's level clinician who can help navigate.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Navigate, any financial aspects. What's the first step do I take to get diagnosed? How do I talk to my mom or dad about this diagnosis because they don't want to believe they have it, right? Or they don't want to step in that. Or if you need someone just to talk to and have them just close their mouth at 2 a.m. in the morning, 2 in the morning, and just cry and just let out those emotions, they can be that emotional support too. That 24/7 helpline, accessible for free.
Is that on your website?
It's on the website, and the phone number is 800-272-3900. And that's accessible to anyone at any time, anywhere in the country. The other resources are what I mentioned earlier, the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's, which we have graphics, we have these on our website, we have free education and awareness presentations we can come around and give. Understanding brain health, just navigating what brain health is, talking about the healthy habits, so getting enough sleep, eating right, wearing a helmet right, staying educated or challenging your mind. So there's significant ways that we can help, again, slow the progression of the disease, and then also make sure that we really step into more of walking with you. And navigating that with you. So we do have a resource on our website, and we have a My Alz Journey app is what it's called. But on our website or the app that we have, it's called Alz Navigator. And you really, it almost walks through your customized standpoint. So you're going to answer a few questions. I'm a caregiver, I'm a person who is diagnosed, and like, what are these next steps? What's the education I need to know? Like, what communities online or here locally can we connect to, whether that's a support group or finding a physician, or how do I even start to talk about long-term care facilities if that's the case too. The goal would be to have someone living with quality care inside their home, but we know that's not the case or affordable or really the reality for everyone walking through that. Also, with that 24/7 helpline, we can also talk to around 200 different languages. So to make sure that we are truly
wow.
providing health equity when
Yes.
it comes across the line of language, because what you said at the very beginning, this disease does not discriminate.
Not at all. So those of you all that are listening, alts.org is the website address. Then there's the Alts Navigator, which is the app. There's an app for that. So there's an app for this.
Miles Journey.
Miles
Miles Journey is
Journey.
the name of the app. Yeah.
Yeah, My All's Journey is the app. So download that, and then the 800 number, 800-272-3900, 800-272-3900. So when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're confused and you're scared, or that's when you're trying to figure it all out, there's someone that you can talk to. So make sure you access those resources, because the beautiful thing about the Alzheimer's Association is that the resources are available, but it's up to all of us as members of the Black and Hispanic community is to access those resources, because they are there, they are available. So Kim, I'm going to come to you with a really quick question. Looking back on your journey, and as you looking back on the journey with your mom and looking forward with the journey you're about to embark on with your dad, what are some of the things that you wish someone had told you before you stepped into your role as a caregiver that you may utilize in this next journey in your life?
I would say don't be afraid for certain, ask for help. I will say that I did call the 24-hour helpline once for my mom, and I got some really, really good advice. And I will say right after that, I felt like, is that going to be anonymous? Or is that going to get out? Oh my goodness, is she going to call me later? I mean, what's happening there? And not to be afraid, because I'm very strong, very proud myself. So, I did take a page from their book. But I would say I'm reading more about what this disease and what it looks like for a very strong male. So my dad is not like my mom, where he knows that he is forgetting things. He has said it to one of his doctors. But I still am not using that word around him. So I will say I'm more just to be aware of the signs more and not to be dismissive of them. That is, and thinking that they'll go away. And don't try to, I think with this next step is not taking the journey in its totality on my shoulders alone, where I'm more engaged, like I say, with my brother who's in Dallas, and he's been very helpful. My older sister, who is retired, and they have a delicate relationship, but just meeting her where she is and how we can come together, knowing that I'm not always right. I'm very impatient though. So I think just getting the help for me, even, to help him be a better him. And to know the stages of things that we know towards the end, not waiting until the end for some of those things. My friend Denise was so helpful when we had to plan things at the end. I was kind of all over the place, and she was like, "You're not, because I'm taking care of this. All you need to do is just look at it after the end, just shut up." So I will say that I'm at least ready in that aspect.
Yeah, that's what you do. So let's talk a bit about cultural values and expectations, especially in communities of color. How that shapes how families respond to, diagnoses like Alzheimer's. And I know you both have seen this through both of the lenses that you walk in. So I'm sure that there's some consistencies here in what you've seen. So Kevin, I'm going to start with you, and then Kim, I'll come around to you. So in the work that you're doing, do you see a difference in your Black and brown communities than your Caucasian or white communities?
Yes. And working in a few different fields of nonprofit work and serving in serving different areas of underreached communities over the past many years, it's the same races and ethnicities fall under the same disparities, right? So whether it's education, health, you name it,
housing,
like housing,
food insecurity,
and Alzheimer's and dementia is no different. And that's really what I mentioned earlier of how can we do better? Like, how can we do better as a state, as health systems, as long-term care facilities, as community nonprofits, basic organizations, individuals to reach out. And cultural values often emphasize the family caregiving. So, which, to your point, Kim, can sometimes delay reaching out, seeking outside help. And that's just dependent on the culture, the beliefs of that particular group, whether it's geographic group, demographic group. And so in some communities, memory loss is seen as a normal part of aging, which I want to be very clear, it's not a normal part of aging. It's a disease, and it's a disease that takes lives a lot sooner than aging would. So for instance, 57% of Hispanic Americans believe that it is a normal part of aging. And half of Black Americans report experiencing discrimination when seeking health care. So when you start to compile these things together of saying like, oh, it's a normal part of aging, I'm not gonna go seek it, or if you're on the other side of well, maybe it is something more and to seek it, it's a challenge even navigating that healthcare system. And think about this, and I'm gonna go back to the point of, is it a disease or is it just aging? When someone loses their keys and remembers them, that's aging. That's a normal part of cognitive decline. When someone loses their keys and forgets they ever had them, that's when the disease becomes more subtle but more significant. And that's really the education we're looking to get out through the Know Where Alzheimer's Hides of specifically, my dad forgot his keys and then he just didn't remember that he was going anywhere, right? Versus he forgot his keys and remembered them a little later. Starting to pick up on those signs that start to pick at some of those cultural beliefs and values of like, well, maybe this is different than what I grew up believing when it comes to healthcare, because the moment you recognize it's a disease, that stigma starts breaking, right? Of like my family member is sick versus they're just getting old. And that's a significant part when it comes to that. So beliefs combined with mistrust of the medical system, that can lead to delayed diagnosis and treatments. And that's one thing that Alzheimer's Association really over the past few years and really over the next 10 years is focusing on how can we have earlier diagnosis happen, earlier testing happen, because believe it or not, the plaques that grow on the brain, the plaques and taus that grow on the brain can start forming 20 years before the first sign and symptom even appear.
Wow.
So 65 and older is typically like the diagnosis age, but there's early onset, and that could be as young as 25, 35, 45.
Wow.
So where we're trying to go now, and there's now a blood test that has been FDA approved. Lumipulse is what it is. Now, it's not the end-all be-all. You can't take this blood test and say definitively, but it can say early diagnosis. The doctor might see the blood results and say there might be something we need to look further into. Let's have continued testing to figure out if this is it or not, because it's not. It's not an old aging, part of aging. It's a disease, and with it starting so early, without the signs and symptoms. Like, those are things that we can either start now of getting adequate sleep, eating healthy exercise, that we can think of now versus 20 years down the line, so we can give ourselves more time. To your point, Kim, give yourself a little more rest, but you think about it a little differently. And that's that early diagnosis, that education, that risk reduction is significant in the shift of education that the Alzheimer's Association is putting out. So when it comes to cultural values and beliefs, it's continuing to educate, but what I mentioned earlier of continuing to build trust with communities that have higher rates of diagnosis. When you couple those two together, of the cultural beliefs that that might be stigmatized, right? I don't want to leave the home because people are going to think or judge me in a certain way and judge our family, versus like, oh, it's a disease, and how can we start educating our care team and that community around us to say, hey, how can we use your support versus your judgment? Because one works better than the other, obviously.
Right. So Kevin, I want to stay with you because you've gone down a really interesting path, and I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about what you think with respect to policy, workplace culture, or even within our healthcare system, what changes need to happen to support caregivers truly?
So that's a very big question, right? And it takes a lot of relationships, times, and influence to make these things happen. I'll start with the workplace culture. Going back to just those data points that I shared earlier, that it's significant, it has a significant impact on the workforce. It can have taking care of the employees, understanding their situation, providing time that's not scraping away at their sick time or PTO, and understanding like this is a family disease, and if you take care of your employee, they're going to be more likely to stay, which retention's longer. You don't have the turnover, you don't have the cost, you don't all have all that stuff that hits your bottom line, right? So understanding, and not just working with the employees for them to understand themselves, because we want to make sure that they're informed about what the resources and services out there. It's getting connected with the leadership and saying, leadership, how can you make this happen as an organization to really provide care to your employee, so then that way they can provide the best work for you and you can support their family too. And that's a significant part. The policy aspect of it is Indiana offers several respite care programs to support family caregivers of those living with Alzheimer's or dementia. And they help them with rest, recharge, while their loved ones receive safe temporary care. And respite care is, and Kim, I don't know if you've ever used respite care. Okay, perfect. And so the choice, which is community and home options to institutional care for the elderly and disabled, that's a long one, but the choice program administered by the state's area agencies on aging, or AAAs is what we call them locally, provides in-home services that includes respite care to Hoosiers ages 60 and older to wish to remain independent in their home. So this goes back to the whole aspect of, if we can help provide care, and this is the policy aspect of it, if we can have someone stay at home and not go into a long-term care facility, like that's the goal of what this is taking place at the state. Now the part of this is we have these programs in place, and we need more funds to go to them, right? Anything political, right, needs funding, shifting of funds. And I will say now, and I'm not going to get into this necessarily, the details, but the funding has shifted away from those areas on aging recently. So it's saying like, okay, so now we know this is a greater need, and the trajectory of Alzheimer's and dementia diagnosis that are taking place across the country are over the past, in the next 30 years. So by 2060. It's expected to double. So there's nearly,
oh my goodness,
right. So there's over
gracious.
7 million Americans who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and that's 65 and over predominantly. So by 2060, they're estimating nearly 14 million individuals. And think about the implications when we talk about workforce or healthcare or families. I mean, could you talk about the baby boomers who are coming out and aging, right? And that disease, and think about the American work culture of hustle, no sleep, right? Little physical activity because you need to eat fast and do these things, but that goes against the 10 healthy habits that we know.
That you all say,
right,
keeps you from being diagnosed with.
That we know that we know scientifically. Say, hey, we can help. Reduce the cognitive decline. So we have just the American culture working against what the science is saying that we need to do.
Well, I always believe the science, so thank you so much for saying that. We're ending the time of our conversation together, so I just have like one final question that I want to ask of the two of you all. And as we close out, what's one thing that you want every person listening to this episode to do this month to better support caregivers in their lives or in their community? What should we be doing?
Ask them what they need. Check on them. Make sure they're okay. Denise, do the 911 call. But just ask them, are you getting enough rest? Mm-hmm. Or if you need to have a conversation with your employer, let me help you craft that. Run it by me. It's almost like an interview. So if there's something that you need to talk with them about, I'll help you with that. Family members, there are your friends. They know your family. and then say I'm having a problem with this particular person. How do you think I can approach it differently? Or should I even try? So I would say ask. Just put it out there of yourself, because you just don't know until you ask. Nothing is too small.
Thank you for that.
And it's brave to ask, right? It takes a lot of bravery to make that jump. And that's one thing that I'll expand upon what you said, is to challenge your cultural beliefs around aging, and to really look at the resources the Alzheimer's Association has. But there's other resources out there. Clearly, I'm going to say the Alzheimer's Association. But learn the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. So the subtle differences of did you lose your keys and forget them, or lose your keys and remember them, or did you lose your keys and that they ever existed at all? It's like those subtle things of like,
it's real subtle.
It's very subtle. So sharing that with those who are around you. If you're walking through being a caregiver right now currently, get out and don't just walk this alone, because you're not alone. But Kim, to your point, share with friends what you're going through. Share with them that it's a disease, that it's a health issue, and it's a public health issue, right? So it's not just my family, it's not just me, it's just not my community. Everyone is somehow affected by this disease, because it's a family disease, which makes it a community disease, which makes it significantly larger. And then the other part is just to call the Alzheimer's Association helpline. Again, that's 800-272-3900, to learn how we can help support you as a caregiver, walk with you, hear you at 2 a.m. if you just need to cry and let go and yell. Like, let us be with you, and know that you're not alone with those resources, and how to navigate the health system, how to manage money, the legal system, everything that comes with the power of attorney. Like, we have resources to at least walk through or get you started on that path, and to connect you locally as well.
Thank you both so much. There's a phrase or African proverb that says it takes a village. The rest of that proverb is it takes a village to raise a child, but we find in the Black community, we just say it takes a village no matter what we're talking about. So where Alzheimer's is concerned, it takes a village. And so I encourage those that are listening to this to let the Alzheimer's Association be a part of your village. Let them be a part of your village, and turn to them for resources and support that you will need to walk this journey, because we never get anywhere alone. There's strength in numbers. So come together. Let's stand shoulder to shoulder and lock arms together and march towards a cure, and march towards solutions to eradicate this disease. So Kim and Kevin, thank you so much for an honest and powerful conversation about, caregiving. It's one of the most selfless things a person can do, and too often it's one of the most invisible. So you've helped shine a light on the emotional weight, the resilience, and the support that caregivers truly deserve. And to our listeners, if today's conversation resonated with you, don't stop here. Check on the caregivers in your life. And if you are a caregiver, reach out and tell somebody, hey, check on me. I need, do you see me? Do you hear me? Do I look off balance to you? Do I have on one blue shoe and one black shoe? Like, help a sister out or help a brother out. Offer that caregiver your time, your patience, your space. And if you know someone that needs resources, just as Kevin said, please visit alts.org/Indiana to learn more about the programs and the support groups available through the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Indiana chapter. As always, thank you for listening to How They See Us. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow Hurt Strategies on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to stay updated on future episodes. Don't forget to visit our website at hurtstrategies.com to subscribe to our monthly newsletter filled with PR insights, episode recaps, and updates on the work we're doing in the community. Until next time, take care and talk soon.